I think the thing that sets Anchorage apart is the ease of access for international tourists. I kind of position Anchorage as a really great opportunity for anyone who's looking for a bit of everything. Knowing that you can come somewhere like Anchorage where you have all of the urban fixtures that people are going to need for comfort and that luxury element, and to be able to blend that really holistically into such an incredibly diverse landscape is pretty unique. It's off the beaten track enough to satisfy that adventurous spirit, but I'm also really pleasantly surprised by the amount of honor and integrity that's paid to the native space, the way that the land is treated, the waterways are treated, the way that consumerism is approached is so incredible. And I think sustainably world class. You know, you come here, you've got one central spot and it's all here for you in the backyard. Like, how lucky.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's IEEE USA webinar, Engineering Safe Futures, Breaking Barriers for Mental Well-Being in Engineering and Construction. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. We'd like to extend a special thank you to our sponsor, Visit Anchorage, for supporting today's webinar. Please note that Visit Anchorage is not affiliated with our presenter, and the views expressed during this webinar are solely those of the presenter. Today's session will feature a slightly different format than our usual webinars. Instead of a full-length presentation followed by Q&A, we'll begin with a short talk from our guest, founder and CEO of Equal Engineers, Dr. Mark McBride-Wright. Following his presentation, Mark will engage in a dynamic conversation with IEEE USA's Managing Director, Russ Harrison. They will dive deeper into the topic and explore key themes in more detail. I'll now pass it off to Russ, who will then introduce our guest speaker, Mark. Welcome, Russ.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Russ Harrison, Managing Director of IEEE USA, and it is an incredible honor today to welcome our speaker, Dr. Mark McBride-Wright. Dr. McBride-Wright is an award-winning author, speaker, management consultant, and an eminent leader in the engineering world, where he has done groundbreaking work helping companies create more open, welcoming, and safe, broadly defined safe workplaces. Among many other honors, Mark has received an MBE in King Charles III's birthday honors for his service and dedication to the field of engineering. And as an American, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but perhaps Mark will be able to explain it to us later. Mark is a chemical engineer, but his professional work is in safety engineering, which gives him a unique perspective on the modern engineering workplace. After uncovering high rates of suicide affecting engineers, Mark conducted research into masculinity in engineering to drive cultural transformation within organizations and founded Equal Engineers to bridge the gap between diverse talent and inclusive employers. This work informed his recent book, The Safe Leader, which explores the importance of workplaces that are both physically and emotionally safe for employees. Equal Engineers has since made great strides in educating thousands of engineers and leaders in fostering inclusive, safe workplace cultures for clients including Airbus, ExxonMobil, EDF Energy, and McLaren F1, which sounds incredibly cool. And with that, Dr. McBride-Wright, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Russ. Pleasure to be here today, everyone. So I'm a chemical engineer by background who specializes in health and safety. I got into health and safety by discovering my passion for exploring what I wanted to do following my undergraduate. I want to take you back to 2009, where I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do professionally for my PhD. I'd applied to 4 different universities, and the best place for me to study was where I had also done my undergraduate master's, Imperial College London. The thing is, my PhD was going to be sponsored by Qatar Petroleum. It was part of a $75 million investment between Qatar Petroleum and Shell to form the Qatar Carbonates and Carbon Storage Research Center, and it was going to be incredible as a first PhD student to go through that, having a brilliant budget on my apparatus and equipment to design high pressure, high temperature systems to measure carbon dioxide and brine systems, viscosity and density. The thing is, I'd also just gotten engaged to my boyfriend at the time, who'd become my fiance. And so before I understood the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, this was a moment in my career where who I was might have affected a decision I was making professionally, because I wasn't sure if I was going to have to spend any extended time overseas. And if I did, for my own personal safety, I didn't really know how open I could be about my sexual orientation. Had that burden become so overwhelming, I may have made a different decision about where I studied. I had the privilege of being an internal applicant, and so I was able to have a conversation with my supervisor at the time, Professor Jeffrey Maitland, and he allayed any concerns that I had and said, Mark, I strongly encourage you to accept. It'll be a great experience. Your contract will be with Imperial. You won't have to go overseas if you don't want to. And I'd encourage you to strongly consider this. So I did, and I went on and completed my PhD in the 4 years that I was at Imperial. Following on from this, I moved into industry and started working in the engineering construction sector, the engineering contracting sector, being able to work in concept design and the evolution of design projects in the oil and gas, government services, and defense spaces. And it was in this time that I set up an organization called Inter Engineering to connect, inform, and empower LGBTQ engineers and supporters. So it was through this that I discovered my passion for diversity, equity, inclusion in engineering. And this has led me in 2017 to venture into entrepreneurship and set up my business, Equal Engineers. And the intention of this business is to help support minoritized groups, underrepresented groups, gain access to employment in engineering and help engineering workplaces create more inclusive cultures. But in venturing into this area, I started to sense a bit of reticence, a bit of pushback when it came to diversity, equity, inclusion. I sensed this sentiment that some people feel it's very binary, it's very them and us. And people can feel like they're pushed back into a corner and being told that they're the problem and they're the cause of all the injustice and the inequity that exists. And this tone, this mindset has really what we've seen play out over the subsequent years since I set up the business to where we're at today, with a real polarity, a real separation in terms of what this stuff really means. Now, if I take you back to 2018, when I was starting this journey of expanding my focus from LGBTQ to other groups that I don't belong to, I started to feel nervous. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells, that for fear of offending, I was going to say the wrong thing, and therefore I was self-censoring my engagement. And so I was going through passively in life, not really connecting with other communities that I don't belong to, acquiring learned experience over lived experience, my own lived experience. And as a safety engineer, I found this interesting because if we don't truly get to know our teams at a deep level, how can we be truly sure that we actually know them, who they are fully and authentically? And I discovered I was at a panel on 2018. I was at a Heathrow Airport. It was a Women in Leadership and Construction Awards event. And there was a statistic that was shared that really shook me up. Statistically, the construction, manufacturing, and process industries had the highest rate of suicide of any sector in the United Kingdom. I couldn't believe this. The industries within which I was employed, that I dedicated my time to, had such a high rate. So I didn't believe it. I did some of our own research at Equal Engineers. So in 2018, we created the Masculinity in Engineering Survey. It was a first of its kind survey looking at the perceptions in engineering culture, specifically on mental health, well-being, and masculinity. And we've done this survey 3 times now since we launched it. In the first survey, we found some alarming statistics that mirrored those that I just shared about at the national level. 1 in 5 engineers said that they'd lost a work colleague to suicide. This was from a sample size of around 800 respondents. A same number said that they had considered suicidal ideation or self-harm. When we reran the survey in 2021, that number of suicidal ideation went up to 1 in 4. So this was mid-pandemic, and what this says to me is that engineering has had a mental health emergency. There's stuff that we need to do here. And as a safety engineer, as a burgeoning diversity, equity, and inclusion wannabe consultant, and a technical engineer by background, this Venn diagram, this intersection, I found interesting because we would never tolerate such a high rate of loss of life due to any physical incident, physical risks like a dropped object, electrocution. So why are we tolerating such a high rate of loss of life due to a lack of psychological safety? Because in its essence, creating a psychologically safe working environment is allowing everyone to bring their true selves to work and everyone to be open. And that also applies to a white, straight, non-disabled male engineer. And what I found in my time now and the work that I've done in all of this is that it's this group in society that are disproportionately affected by mental ill health, disproportionately affected by suicidal ideation and self-harm, that feel like they can't open up. And so there's work to do in this space. And I think this is a narrower picture of what we've seen play out in a lot of spaces. So there's work to do in this because inclusion means everyone belonging. And so I think there's work to do in this. And if we look back at the evolution of safety management, so I felt this really is truly my life's work, what I think will be my life's work and my legacy and so on and so forth. And so I wrote a book on this called The Safe Leader. And in this, I look back at some safety management theory, safety culture theory, and look at how we can repurpose this in terms of inclusion. So the DuPont-Bradley curve was developed by DuPont, and what it shows is injury rate as a function of safety culture. And what you see is that back in the past, we responded to unsafe acts based on our natural instincts, i.e., we did not want to die. So the amygdala that's in our brain that sets us into response, fight or flight mode would be activated whenever we saw something in the workplace or on the manufacturing floor that puts us at risk. Industrialization, remember, started in the 1800s or so. So what was acceptable in the past has gradually become unacceptable, and so things change. Injury rates were high, so we needed to legislate. Legislation started coming through, so we had more of a compliance motivation for safety. We did it because it keeps us safe. We're told to do it by our supervisors. We realized it's quite good not dying at work, and so we evolved into this self-preservation. We are more proactive. So it's moved away from the amygdala and us naturally responding to things to instead us each being proactive for our own self-preservation in the workplace, an independent culture. And then looking out for the safety of our teams, we have this idea of an interdependent culture. And what I propose in this is an extension to the Bradley curve with a slight nuance, whereby inclusive interdependence is about creating safe teams. So what that means is I might not agree with who you are, what you do, what you say, your belief system, etc. But I'm going to look out for you in this environment because I know that if you're looking out for me, by reciprocity, you're also looking out for me. And so what we're going to do is collectively drive up the standard and the level of vigilance between one another about creating a safe working environment, both physically and also psychologically. I often use the example of a lighthouse. Imagine a lighthouse on the coast with ships sailing by, boats. The lighthouse is an engineered design to stand and weather the storm, come rain or shine. It's present and physical there. If you think of the light as being an individual story, something that someone shares that you can then relate to. When you hear a story that you relate to, you learn more about that individual than what you see from just looking at them. You evolve into a deeper, more trusting relationship. And what I've seen throughout the arc of my career thus far is that engineers are not very good at sharing elements of ourselves. We're very logical, very practical, very technical. We lack sometimes the emotional side. And that's really, really important. And so I often work with teams where they're working with them and coaching them and getting that deeper empathy between one another is a great way to start building a stronger, more collaborative culture together. This includes, therefore, men also being open about their stories, about things that they're going through, the trials and tribulations, because it's my belief that the reason we have such a high rate of suicide and self-harm at the extreme end is because people are not being open about how they're showing up at work, the stories, the experiences that they're going through. The thing is, everyone's going through something. So if we have a culture in our organization and in our sector that encourages this openness and encourages this dialogue and this sharing, then my hypothesis of what I postulate is that maybe we'll see a reduction in this high incident rate of suicidal ideation and self-harm. So there is a way here for safety to help bring us all closer together. I want to share with you a story. So it's 2016. I'm at a railway depot just outside London, and it's round about the time of the Brexit vote. I walk into the training room. There are 4 engineers who are there. All of them, 4 of them sitting there, arms crossed, looking at their hands, looking at their time. Some of them clearly do not want to be there. And I actually said to one of them, look, you can leave if you want. I'm not holding you hostage. I'm just a trainer. Anyway, we started talking about, diversity and safety, and I started framing things in the way that I'm very quickly doing so here. And what gradually unraveled was one of them was quite vocal and was a strong believer in Brexit and was sharing that he didn't think it was a problem. He thought it was going to be great for our country, so on and so forth. And one of the louder guys then became silent. And I looked at him and he was quiet. And he eventually spoke and he said, I've been going home at night. My wife is Danish. She's finding this really difficult. She doesn't know what it means for us as a couple. Are we going to have to spend time apart? Is she going to get indefinite leave to remain? Are we going to have to separate for a long period? Can we even be together on the long term? And then I come into the workplace and zip, I contain it for her stress. And when I come into the workplace, and he pointed to his colleague, just keep going on and on and on and on. I am fed up of it. I am sick of it. I've had enough. You could hear a pin drop in that room. I drew their attention back to me and I said, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So we went through the rest of the session and the guys came up to me at the end and they said, Mark, thank you so much. We did not think this is what we were going to be covering, but we really now know and understand one another on a level that we haven't connected before. Thank you. So I knew I was onto something with this alignment of male majority working environments where there is a desire to do more, a desire to build connection and do better, but not really knowing how. And engineers who like data to evidence this. So my ambition is to grow this at a global scale, ultimately, if I can claim to be so bold, to do that. So I wrote a book called The Safe Leader. The Safe Leader was published in 2024, so it came out last year. Dame Judith Hackett, who is the former chair of the Health and Safety Executive, wrote the foreword for my book. And in a recent podcast that I did with her, she even said to me, Mark, reading your book, it made me realize that maybe back in the day, we got things a bit wrong. Maybe we should have had more time, more space, focusing on how our male colleagues were showing up in the workplace with all the pressure that they were enduring and what they're going through. And so what I do now in my work is I lead with this to help work with engineering organizations that want to do better in the safety space. I believe that safety and engineering provide an opportunity for us to still achieve all the benefits that we set out to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, but to do it in a way that is not polarizing and not divisive. It's in a way that includes everyone. That isn't about getting off the hook of not doing the hard work to dismantle systemic racism and misogyny and homophobia and all the isms, but it's about doing it in a way that brings everyone's story to the table and the focus. So in the book, the training model that we lead with is the SAFE leader model, where each word stands for a concept. So we have share, act, feel, and empower. And then what we've done is blended the benefits of storytelling and story mining to help people dig deep and first and foremost understand what's their difference, what's their story. If you shared that thing that you went through, could that be the metaphorical lighthouse for others to then emotionally connect with and learn from? And then by laws of probability, if we've got more lighthouses being turned on, more stories being shared, we decrease the likelihood of people feeling isolated and alone and like they've not got anyone that they can talk to. So time and time again, when I talk on stages and I share this, I get people coming up to me talking about their struggle to conceive a family, fertility, IVF, going through a nasty divorce, separation. It's hard. We all have stuff going on in our lives, but we need a bit of time sometimes to encourage that sharing. So I think oftentimes our programs on diversity and that get lost in the, whether we should be flying flags here or there or whatever, when actually it's the human element. It's about connecting human to human and being able to be open about anything that's making you not feel safe. Because what we ultimately want is people being physically present and also mentally present, not physically present and mentally absent. It's a health and safety risk. If you've got someone doing a high hazard operation, like doing a crane movement, you don't want them being distracted by thinking about something else that's happening in their life. And that's what the concept of masking, covering, hiding is. The energy delta between showing up as who you truly are and how you are feeling that day versus projecting a different version of yourself, but actually inside you're preoccupied with that argument that you had in the morning with your wife because actually you feel like you're on the precipice of a separation or divorce. We're all like that at some point in our mindset, but it's about having a culture where, if needed, you can be open about it. It's not about the removal of privacy and you now have to be open about everything, but it's about having a culture where this help and support from colleagues and policies are there. So anyway, we take our learners through this. It's a 4-module training course that we've got: share, act, feel, empower. We encourage our learners to find that story within themselves, that if they were to share that, it would help increase learning for others. And then we take them through the subsequent stages about ultimately building up empathy for other groups. And so it's a constant cycle that we do. That's why it's circular. And I've kind of given a bit more context already on this. So 4 modules, we work with many businesses on this, and we've infused the benefits of public speaking training, which engineers oftentimes need a bit of help and support. And my ambition is to, be able to start capturing these stories and to be scaling it out. So we've got some really exciting projects in the pipeline, and I'd welcome anyone to get in touch with me who might be interested in finding out more information for your organization. And just a little bit more, if you want to keep in touch with what we're doing, my book is available on Amazon. We are working with some engineering universities now about getting elements of it included in the engineering education programs, so that we're actually doing some work to educate our future leaders. I've got a podcast called the Safe Leader Podcast. We've got 20 odd episodes there that you can go and listen to leaders from across engineering who are specialists in safety and culture. Some really interesting stories on there. And I also have a Safe Leader Insights newsletter that comes out every Thursday or Friday. Every Thursday or Friday. There isn't one this week. Unfortunately, my mum passed away last weekend, so I'm giving myself the grace to not rush into publishing one this week. We're taking a week off, me and my team there, but it will be available from next week onwards. And the QR code there takes you to a page that I have just with feedback on my talk, and if you'd like to get in touch any further. I think that is it, and I'd love to come to the Q&A now.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mark. That sets us up nicely for our conversation, and I wanted to start by talking about a particular anecdote that was in your book. And it was, for me, it was the point at which your book went from kind of interesting to actually important. And it was a story about work you did on an oil rig. And you had gone in to help the workforce on the rig operate more effectively as a team. And as I've never been on an oil rig, but I can imagine very male dominated, very kind of stereotypical male environment where virtues like strength, like toughness, like stamina are not just valued, but actually are essential to get the job done.
Yeah.
But what you pointed out was in that kind of stereotypical male environment, and of course, it's about the culture. Plenty of women have these problems as well, but it was very difficult for the men, in being the tough, strong individuals they had to be, to also admit failure and to also admit weakness. It was actually a matter of life and death for the team that they understood each other's weaknesses and understood each other's failures. And to me, that story kind of made it clear to me the importance of what you're talking about. And so how can an organization start to overcome things like that? How can an organization start to encourage the honesty that's necessary for the group to function correctly?
I think so. Firstly, that case study to which you refer was a study done by Eli and Meyerson that was published in the Harvard Business Review that I actually read in about 2010 or 2013. It was done in 2010, and it was like gold dust finding this study, because as you said, Russ, it was the first time I read about what they did was across the assets in the Gulf of, in the Gulf, they challenged the status quo of leadership and shifted it from one of dominance and fear and power to one of empathy and inclusive leadership ultimately. And they did that through a long training program by metaphorically breaking down these big, macho men that were leading offshore and built them up again with inclusive leadership qualities, and performance across the assets went up. And it wasn't put down to any enhanced turnaround or enhanced oil recovery or reliability improvements. It was put down to better leadership offshore. So how can an organization help its employees admit their weaknesses and flaws? Firstly, having a culture where vulnerability is encouraged is a strong one. And having leaders role model this is critical. In fact, and if it's not done, then I think to expect then the wider workforce to do it, I just don't think it's going to happen. What I find in my work with leaders is that they often forget that they're like a mini celebrity in their company, right? So they and their impact, they cast a leadership shadow across the organization. So their picture at the check-in when you arrive to do the health and safety induction, and the little corporate video that were always played where the leader appears there, or their picture on the health and safety welcome chart, or their signature in an email, or their voice at a town hall or on a webinar, that carries emotional currency across the broader workforce. And so what that leader stands for and how they role model themselves gives permission for the other behaviors that are upheld. So if a leader can lower the guard a bit, let us in a bit to understand their vulnerabilities and their sides, that will then give permission for the broader workforce to do so similarly. But sometimes, as I said, I find that people, and that includes leaders, often got caught in this trap of, oh my goodness, I'm going to offend, I'm going to say the wrong thing, there's going to be backlash if I do this. I'm not going to even open any of that or engage in any of that stuff because it's like opening up a can of worms. I'm just going to stay quiet, stay in my lane, do my thing, and for fear of pushback, not get involved. So there's work in sharing. If you share that you've gone through something, then in fact, I said I was going to share an example. So I worked with a leadership team. It was 10 of them. It was a big financial institution here in London. And it transpired that 3 of them were having fertility issues. One of them was going through IVF. One of them had a miscarriage, unfortunately. And another one was also struggling to conceive. And they did not know that about one another. They were a trusting team. They believed that they trusted one another, but none of them had actually opened up about each of their respective experiences. And so they thought, wow, statistically, if that's what's playing out amongst us 10, so 30% of the group here, we scale this up to the organization level. What does that mean about our workforce? We've got no inclusive policies for bereavement leave, for child loss, or so on and so forth. So they actually ended up talking about this at a town hall, being vulnerable, opening up, and it led to then the establishment of a parent and carers network and a more frank and open conversation on, child loss and things like that. So that is one way that leaders can role model behavior changes.
And that particular issue, as we talked about earlier, is a very difficult one for people to talk about. And it's finding ways, and it impacts the workforce, as you pointed out. And finding ways to talk about it is hard. It occurred to me that another area that's difficult to talk about, because we're not supposed to, is religion.
Yes.
That's private. We don't do that here in the office, but people's religious beliefs do impact their work, their schedule, what they can and can't do, what they can and can't wear. I mean, it does impact the workforce. So given that religion is a very personal matter for most people and is not a matter for the business, how do you incorporate that? How do you allow conversations in a forbidden area to begin?
I think, I guess, is it forbidden, or have we just not yet tackled the discussion in a way that has then broken down the fact that we perceive that it's forbidden thus far? I'd say it's probably more the latter than the former. And so usually the start of these sort of conversation evolutions in the workplace occur when there are some early adopters that want to talk more openly about certain aspects of their identity that they're feeling constrained about. So I'd encourage people to think, if you feel like that, then maybe there's a way in which you can bring the conversation about to celebrate some of your religious identity in the workplace. People connect often through food. I've worked in workplaces where, we've had people from all religious backgrounds, and they'll bring in food to celebrate certain religious festivals that they might cover. And that then leads to a curiosity on the part of the people that don't have that lived experience of practicing and following that religion, because the only way they're going to acquire that perspective is through learned experience of learning from others. And if we're not having the conversation, and our only resource to acquire that learned experience is through what we see in the media and gets reported on news channels, then that has got an incredible bias and spin and vilification sometimes that's put on it, that we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to meet everyday people to learn about their context and how they go about living their lives. So I think with religion, having that recognition first is important, questioning what your own reference point is to different religions, and some will have a deeper connection to others than others. And then you will have biases. You will have biases about different religions. So how can you challenge them? How can you overcome them? And so in the workplace, like I said, fostering some celebrations of different cultural aspects of our religion is one way. And also recognizing that in some religions, the calendar of the festivities, for example, changes. It changes across the year. So Ramadan sometimes takes place in the summer when the days are long. There's lots of daylight, so the time to actually eat food is shorter because it's in the summer. So there'll be different well-being challenges on people who practice different religions that will maybe be affecting concentration at work. So adjustments that can be made short term, depending on when something is showing up, is just good workforce HR management, right? So yeah, and there will be areas that overlap where they are divisive, they're difficult, hard conversations, and you just need to decide whether or not you're willing to have that.
Connecting through food. I love that. That's a fantastic idea. Not only is food a great bridge, but there's great food involved, which is always a good thing. Excuse me, Mark. So in The Safe Leader, you used a phrase which I loved, and I wrote it down when I was reading it. Well, listening. I listened to it on audiobook. But you said that leaders must proactively create disruptive knowledge-sharing forums.
Yes.
To help their staff get to know each other, which is a much more aggressive term than an icebreaker, which nobody likes and rarely works. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is a disruptive knowledge sharing forum, and why is it so important?
So, I mean, a disruptive knowledge sharing forum is taken at full scale, going all in. I'm committed to this change, and I'm providing every modality possible for our organization to embrace difference and to help our people learn from different groups. So it takes for leaders to start that conversation, and to not just conversation, but actual action. Being an ally, being a supporter is an active verb. And some of the most powerful leaders, when you practice the skill of learning in real time, so admitting when you don't know something, being open to being corrected by it in real time, acknowledging your mistake and error and the fact that you've then learned from it, shows that you're also not perfect and you don't have everything right. Creating these knowledge sharing forums allows for that learning to happen. And so that's what I mean by that. It's about leaders not being of the causing offense side, the walking on eggshells idiom that I often refer to, and then actually just fully embracing being disruptive and recognizing that it will be uncomfortable as well, and there'll be some things that you get challenged on that you feel, I don't really have a reference point for this. But pushing through that, you then come to a place of understanding. And also, it's worth just caveating that this isn't about making everyone agreeable with one another. This isn't about me now you need to change your viewpoint and your attitude in order for me to exist in this workplace. We're never going to get that. Psychological safety is about allowing conscious difference to coexist, such that fact that constructive disagreement can happen, and that's how we get those diverse perspectives helping shape a design problem or an engineering predicament that we're in, without people filtering or masking or hiding or not sharing what they really want to share for fear of getting it wrong or being, power imbalances, etc.
And that perspective you have there was what really sold the book on me. And going back to our oil rig workers, it wasn't that people were telling them don't be strong and don't be brave and don't be tough and don't be all the things that they prided themselves in being. It was finding a way to admit weakness within that construct and to make that part of the definition, which I think is fantastic. So roughly the same part of your book, when we talked about proactively creating disruptive knowledge sharing forums, you highlighted one of the big conflicts that I'm seeing pretty much everywhere, which is the generational shift between kind of pre-COVID workers and newer workers entering the workforce.
Yep.
And those intergenerational conflicts, which are affecting everybody everywhere and are proving to be oddly difficult to deal with. I just wondering your thoughts on how your system can help and how we should all think about this.
Sure. I think firstly, it's about not stereotyping an individual based on your perception of their age, and therefore, by definition, the generation into which they fit. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot. And when I'm on panels, and if anyone ever uses the phrase pale, stale male, I always call it out. Because it's completely counterproductive to creating inclusive cultures, right? It's you're essentially assuming that because of someone's age that they are incapable of developing inclusive leadership qualities. You've written someone off. And that's it. And I think that is the kind of way in which a lot of people feel, and that's why we've seen the pushback that we've had against DEI and internationally in a lot of places. So I think my advice would be to not play into the stereotypes that can exist with each generation. So that applies equally to the baby boomers and all that are still in the workplace, but also to the Gen Z and Gen Alpha that will be entering the workforce in the years to come. It's about meeting people where they're at and helping connect people on a human to human level. And so that will require more proactive storytelling, more so in my organization, Equal Engineers, we run a reciprocal mentoring program. And originally we've taken over 500 students through it since we set it up, and some of them now have got jobs in industry, and it's been brilliant. And what we found is that engineers love connecting with engineers, right? It doesn't matter your background, what sex, gender, skin color, disability status, etc. that you are. If you pair similar engineers from the same background, same discipline together, then they love talking about the engineering. And so in the first rollout of our program, originally, one of the reasons some students from underrepresented groups don't get into industry at the same rate is due to a lack of, the soft skills. I know we call them other things now, like functional skills. So my hypothesis was, well, let's just connect engineer with an engineering student. Doesn't matter the engineering discipline background. But actually, the thing we learned from that was we had to connect similar engineering backgrounds because people liked connecting with shared similar technical backgrounds. So we had older engineers who were in the later stages of their career mentoring engineering students that were from a different background to them. And it was just really nice to see that connection happen. So programs like that, I mean, obviously I'm talking about between different states of the talent pipeline, incoming talent and established talent, running mentoring programs within your organization or through your society, like the IEEE USA, engaging in mentoring programs is one way to help break down barriers between different generations.
We only have a few more minutes, and then we're going to go to audience questions. So if audience members have questions, please put it in the chat wherever it is that you are, and we will circle back to a few of those in a minute. But I wanted to ask a fundamental question. One of the critiques of kind of this approach to embracing differences in different types of people is an acknowledgement, excuse me, that most people prefer to be with people who are like them. And if that's a fundamental characteristic, why should we fight that? I mean, it's just easier not to. So as a workforce, as a team, let's just stick with people like us because we're more comfortable. Why do we not want to do that?
Really good question. Firstly, recognizing that is how we're wired, it goes a long way, and accepting that is critical. We surround ourselves by people that are like us. That's natural. It's always the outcome, more or less, from the Trusted 10 exercise that I've done with hundreds of engineers in my training. But there are risks with that, because if you always surround yourself with people that are like you build really deep, trusting relationships with them. You are also then confiding in them when you have gone through a rough patch, and similarly them with you. Therefore, the context of what they've gone through will be affecting your bias. So the people that are in your inner circle, your trusted 10, stories that they've shared with you in the past, experiences that you've gone through together, shape your perspective in the world. And if that group isn't very diverse or isn't from a broader range, if they're quite similar, then you're inherently lacking in a broader opportunity to pull in more diverse perspectives. If you take a design team, for example, if you've got a bunch of engineers that have all gone to the same university, studied, same engineering qualifications, and they're now working on a project, and you've got another group of engineers that have studied in Australia, in Nigeria, in Canada, the US, the United Kingdom, they've worked on different types of projects, mining and oil and gas and whatever, what group are going to probably perform better relative to the others? It's a risk. It's unknown, but oftentimes in this example, the diverse group will outperform the homogeneous group, but only if it's managed correctly. When you've got that diversity of perspective, of experience, of background, that can be hard to channel that energy. And I'm kind of using these hand gestures because I'm sort of imagining this energy ball that you're trying to funnel in a certain way. So the opportunity is there to have a very high performing team, but only if the curator, the orchestrator, has that inclusive leadership quality to really get the best out in the people. In a non-diverse group, in a group where there's increased risk of groupthink, less likelihood to challenge one another because there's that familiarity, that background. So the benefit of broadening one's perspective means that you get a greater opportunity to learn from other people. They might never make it into your inner circle, your trusted 10, because as we say, we do surround ourselves by people that are like us, but we need to be aware of what's feeding our subconscious mind. And we actively do have to proactively seek diversity, because we don't come about it in our day-to-day lives often. And that's an issue for engineering if we have a lack of difference in our workforce.
And Jonathan, if we have questions, if you want to bring them forward, questions from the audience. But while you're doing that, I did want to note, Mark, that's, again, one of the things I really liked about your approach to all this is an open acknowledgement that this is hard, that embracing diversity is not easy. It is a challenge. It is contrary to parts of our nature, but it's usually worth it if you put the energy into making it happen.
Yeah, and I just think we're tripping over semantics. Honestly, the statistics that I presented at the beginning speak for themselves. They're not changing, right? They don't discriminate on the grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity or whatever. They're affecting us. They're affecting our workforce, and so we just, whether we call it diversity or something else, I believe that forgetting other sectors, in engineering, we have an opportunity to go in the lane of safety, and it's a risk management and safety strategy, ensuring that we have greater difference.
And just to remind folks, the statistic there was that 1 in 5 engineers knows of someone who is a victim of suicide. And then 1 in 4 who had considered suicide or self-harm, which are astoundingly high numbers. And I think I was as shocked by them as you were.
If you look at in the USA, over 700 construction workers die by suicide each year. If you look at the Bureau of Land Labor Statistics, the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, if we had a rate of loss of life of that due to other root causes that we're aware of, like physical hazards, there would be entire design solutions and innovations deployed to try and eradicate and remove that, So we've got work to do. We've got work to do.
Yeah. Jonathan, do we have any questions from the audience? Situational awareness that seems to be missing is just yet near of a revolution as opposed to reform of an old idea.
Modernity.
That's a complicated question there, Jimmy.
So I think we have to have situational awareness. It's like engineering is a dynamic system. The workplace is a dynamic system. And in dynamic systems, things can change quite quickly and go in different directions. So there's a really good book by a fellow author from PYP, Publish Your Press, the publisher that I used, called LaTonya Wilkins. And it's called Leading Below the Surface. And she gives this, when there's a concept that you want to put a word to, but you've never quite thought of it. Her book did that for me. And it describes when you're in a situation, you're in a networking event, and you're tuned in to the non-verbal communication that's happening around you. You're observing who's being physically included and excluded in the group dynamics in the room. And you're able to navigate that room whilst maintaining connection and conversation, but also have some sort of spidey senses about what's happening for others and how others are experiencing that situation and how your interaction is affecting their engagement and their behavior. So I think situational awareness, I don't know if this answers the question, but being aware of your impact on one another's behavior and engagement, and how included and how they show up in the workplace, is a really important quality for a good leader to develop.
Well, Jonathan is bringing up the next question. A word you brought up a number of times in your book and in your podcast and other work is the idea of curiosity.
Yes.
And the important role that curiosity plays in leadership, which one of my beliefs is that most of the most important ideas in the world are obvious when somebody else points them out. And this is one of them. Can you talk just a second about curiosity and why it's such a big deal?
So I just think it's something that we lose as we become adults. Curiosity, I've got two kids who are aged 5 and 7, and they're curious about the world. They want to understand how things work, where people go when they pass away. They're curious about everything. They want information. And I think as we get older, we lose that inner child. We lose that curiosity. Being curious doesn't imply that you're going to go one way or the other on a particular concept or topic. You just want more information. You want to find out more. It's neutral. It's inherently neutral being curious, I think anyway, maybe I'm wrong. And so leaning into that more when it comes to finding out about things that you don't know about, being curious. I think it's a really, we don't stay in the state of play and curiosity enough as adults. We lead important organizations, and we have big objectives and KPIs to fulfill, and the news is filled with politics, etc., etc. When are people most relaxed? When they're playing and having fun and smiling, the shoulders relaxed. They're curious, or they're more likely to be curious. So I think leaning into that energy in oneself, doing whatever it is that you need to do to bring that for you, whether it's having a conversation with a friend, reconnecting with some children in your life, or doing a fun activity that brings out that fun side of you, or a hobby that you love, bringing that curiosity then into the workplace and finding that out in others is a really fun way to understand elements of identity that you cannot see from looking at someone. My colleague this week actually shared a quote that she lives by in that it's a bit controversial, but she says, "A stranger is just a friend who you've not yet met," So we're too glued nowadays to be on these things, to connect with people and talk. Just have a conversation. Be curious. That person sitting next to you on the train or in the plane might be your next hire or your next client. Just be curious, have conversations.
It occurs to me that being curious is a nicer way of being vulnerable. vulnerable sounds dangerous, but being curious is not. That's normal, but it's admitting that you don't know something. We were almost out of time, but Chuck Lair asked an interesting question in the chat. Essentially, it's how can you overcome management's resistance to this, inclusivity, recognizing that it's hard and it's expensive, even if it's not money, it's time. You got enough hard things to do at work. Why not?
Great question, Chuck. Great question. So, like I said in my intro, I used to work in concept design, right? So that's the first stage in the design stage process. Concept design, front-end engineering design, detailed design, then you get to operation, building, commissioning, and operations, etc. So in concept design, you've got more degrees of freedom to play with to ensure that a design is as safe as possible as it moves through the design cycle. Similarly, you've got more degrees of freedom on the cost. And once you start moving through the design stages and start making decisions and things become fixed, you've got less degrees of freedom to make changes, and actually things become more expensive and more costly if you start changing them downstream. So the same applies to how you construct your workforce in your design teams. If you don't design for difference within your engineering teams, at the extreme end, if things go wrong or if the culture doesn't quite go as it should, you've got risk of legal ramifications, of lawsuits, of bullying, of harassment, of people leaving your organization. And whenever we lose someone in a business, it's not just the cost of replacing the individual with expensive near-term contractors and also the recruitment costs of a new full-time equivalent. There's also the displaced impact on other people in the team having to take on additional work. So it's hard to quantify too high of a cost, but there are many ways in which these costs show up on the engineering flow diagram, the project sheets essentially of large projects, if we don't consider them early on. So another thing in my book, or an area I want to explore further, is I'm really interested in the themes that we have from inherent safety management, which is a mindset where we try and make things as safe as practicable from the beginning so that we reduce the reliance on add-on safety measures further down the line, which could potentially go wrong or fail, and therefore we have catastrophic incidents. I'm interested in how we create as inclusive and diverse as possible engineering design teams and communities so that the engineering workforce of the future is filled with people who are passionate about engineering, who want to be engineers, but then are creating solutions and products that affect as many people as possible. If you've got a very homogenous design team, put it this way, if there were more people with disabilities in engineering, the built environment would look very, very different to the built environment that we're used to living in today.
Mark, we're just about out of time, which is unfortunate because we just had a couple of good questions added to the chats. But you touched on this a second ago, but what's next? Where does your work take you next?
Where does my work take me? Oh, thanks, Russell. Great question. So I have been living in the US for the last year in Brooklyn. I will soon be relocating back to the United Kingdom. I'm really interested in taking my work global, deepening my impact here in the UK, being back with my team, but continuing to work with the societies, the institutions like IEEE USA that I've made connections with to help build this out. I'm particularly interested in working with high hazard industries, companies that work in sectors that are high risk, where the workforce is familiar with risk management as a core part of its culture, and then to come in and see how we can kind of expand a little bit this concept of physical safety into psychological safety, and then obviously into leadership development. So that's I've got that in play, and I've also got some other exciting projects looking at the education side. So again, taking the engineering analogy of feed forward loops, what work can we do today that expedites the rate of change for the workforce evolution tomorrow? That means working with our engineering students who are currently going through engineering education. And that's something that I do through my visiting professorship at University College London with the students that we have there.
Fantastic. Mark, this has been great. This is not an easy subject. for many of us to grapple with, but as you demonstrated early, it's something that is necessary, and that creating safe environments physically and emotionally for engineers and for everybody is a matter of life and death in many cases. And if not that, it's certainly a way of enriching our lives and our experiences. So I want to thank you. I'll remind everyone the recording of this session will be available online, which includes a link to Dr. McBride Wright's book and his podcasts and his other material, should you have other questions you wish to raise with him. And with that, Mark, thank you for joining us today. We're very honored.
Thank you so much, Russell. It's been a pleasure. It's been really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone. So that brings us to the end of our session. A big thank you to Mark and Russ both for joining us today and sharing such insightful perspectives. You've given us plenty to reflect on and take back with us. We really appreciate both your time and expertise. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for tuning in and for your great questions as well. A few announcements before we close things off today. First, IEEE USA is now accepting nominations for its 2027 Board of Directors. This is your opportunity to help shape the future of IEEE USA and make a lasting impact on the engineering profession. We invite dedicated members to step forward or nominate qualified candidates for leadership roles. The nomination deadline is August 20th. Up next, we have a new Innovation, Workforce, and Research Conference, or iWork, coming up. Join us in Grand Forks, North Dakota on September 10th for our IEEE USA iWork AI and Autonomy. We will meet, network, learn, and discuss federal and state technology initiatives related to artificial intelligence and autonomy and other government programs that promote innovation in small businesses in the upper Midwest. This event will give you an opportunity to meet potential partners from the U.S. federal agencies and learn more about how you can contribute to North Dakota and the Midwest innovation ecosystem. Registration is now open. Finally, we're only 5 days away from the deadline to secure your spot aboard IEEE USA's cruise to the Western Caribbean this fall. While the cruise may still be months away, your dream cabin might not wait that long. For those who have joined us on our previous 2 cruises, you already know the incredible experiences and connection this event offers. For first-timers, this is your chance to create unforgettable memories and embark on a journey packed with excitement. Time is almost up, and once cabins are gone, they're gone. Lock in your spot today and get ready for the ultimate escape. If you enjoyed the content presented in today's webinar, please be sure to check out our extensive catalog of other presentations and publications available on demand on our website for your viewing pleasure. And if you haven't yet, be sure to like and subscribe to our IEEE USA social media channels. And don't forget to check back daily for updates on upcoming events. Have a great day, everyone.
I am passionate about energy, so I look forward to coming to work every day. I work on challenges across the world that actually solve problems for people. In the next decade, I want to be a thought leader influencing some of the key decisions in the energy space. IEEE has given me a competitive edge by helping me hone my leadership skills. It is the best decision you can make as a young engineer. IEEE is my competitive edge.